How's everybody doing this week? This is Greg Bell. I'm your host here on the Legends Community Show, guys. A lot going on in the world of sports right now. Got a lot to talk about. I don't know really the right place to start, if I should start with the crime or if I should start with the passion. It's just so much going on. Want to throw a big shout out. We're going to talk about this later in the show. There used to be a time when if you hit 600 home runs, the ocean parted, the clouds parted. We gave a big celebrity. Well, one of those kind of welcomes that you can a parade down New York City. The Muhammad Ali kind of thing. When Babe Ruth did it, it was special. When Hank Aaron did it, it was special. But now over the last 20 years, something has happened to the 600 home run hitters. And I'm an Albert Pujols fan, guys. I love Albert Pujols. Big guy, swings a big bat. A first-time Hall of Fame batter, Hall of Fame MLB player. And then last week, he hit 600, and it kind of went by like it was nothing. I want to talk about that. If you're baseball fans, what has happened to the game that America's pastime is just kind of passe? Albert hit 600 home runs. We talk about it for 2 days, and we spend all week talking about the comparison in the 96 Bulls versus the 2017 Warriors. The game hasn't even gotten to a point where we can even compare the two. But we spend more time on a small smidgen of success versus a guy who just hit his 600th home run in 11 years. And there are guys that are listed that it took them 20 years to hit 600 home runs. Albert Pujols has done it in a little over a decade, and we kind of just brushed it to the side. I want to talk about that. If you're a baseball fan, hockey fans, where are you at right now? Nashville playing some great hockey right about now, and everybody's coming out of the woodworks. The country singers, the actors, the ball players. Did you see Chuck? Did you hear him? I got to talk to you about that. It's just hilarious when you watch Charles Barkley and Shaq on the same stage. I don't know if it's real or if it's, passe. I don't know if these guys really like each other or not. He said something that was so hilarious. I was watching him and he talked about being on ice skates and, they were talking to him about the fact, have you ever gotten on ice skates and gone out and played? And Charles was like, nah. He said, me getting on ice skates is like looking at Shaq's feet. I, I was like, where did that come from? Shaq's feet, he said, just ugly. He said, that's me on ice, just ugly. I want to talk about that. What kind of a relationship do you think Charles has with Shaq? Because for some reason, they're always talking about punching each other. And I just get a kick out of watching the two. Like I said, I don't know if these guys are just a great act or, could there be a little animosity between the two? And trust me, guys, as much as you love the game and you think that all of the Hall of Fame players are best buds, there's some animosity. There's some guys on that Hall of Fame wearing that yellow jacket as they wear, as we call it, but they're wearing that jacket and they don't like each other. I want to talk about that. Got to talk about LeVar Ball. We're getting to the nitty gritty right now. I don't know if LeVar is helping or hurting Lonzo. Here's a kid who I think individually he's a quiet killer. This kid has a lot of tools. He's a gifted big guard in the mode of a Magic Johnson, has the capabilities of being someone like that. But we're spending so much time. Look at me right now. I'm spending time talking about his father. Is he worth drafting because you got to bring this along? And here's the thing. I've met the father, I've met the son. Neither one of these guys are probably as crazy or as outlandish as they seem right now. But the thing that's bothering me right now is everybody is negative towards Lonzo. And this is a kid who really hasn't spent too much time doing any talking. He lets his play on the court show for himself. And now we're spending so much time talking about should somebody draft him? Should you pass over him? to the fact that he even passed on going over to Boston to work out for them, even though they have the number one pick. And, I'm kind of curious because as a kid growing up in the south side of Columbus, Ohio, I could only do but one thing and dream about being the number one pick in the NBA or NFL, MLB draft. And here I got a guy who's walking away, don't even want to be the number one pick. And if it's a number, the money evidently is of no factor because the 1 and 2, it's a smidgen in terms of money. I mean, okay, he might get about $500,000 more. That can be made up. He's already made that with his shoe deal. And it's kind of funny. He said he spent hours working on the design of his shoe deal. That just tells you got to get a little bit better designer because it kind of looks kind of plastic. But that's just my take on the Lonzo shoe. But are we spending too much time talking about his dad and not focusing on the fact that this kid is one of the top 5 ball players coming out of the draft this year? Is he the number 1? Is he the number 5? Guys, nobody's ever going to be able to tell you that until 10 years down the road. But he has the capability of being the first pick of the draft, and he's shying away from it. I want to get your feelings on that. Of course, we got to talk about the NBA playoffs right now. So much is being talked about the Warriors, the depth of this Warrior team. And I have to be honest with you. When I look at the Golden State Warriors, I don't see a lot of depth. I see 5 good players who play well together. And, yeah, they bring David West off the bench, and he gets in and he might put in 10 points. But their bench is not really that deep. So when you start making comparisons, and we're going to make a comparison, I'm going to ask you, what do you think about it? But when you start making a comparison about the 96, 97 Bulls team, you got to remember they had a strong bench. They had Kerr coming off the bench. They had Craig Hodges coming off the bench. The Cartwright was coming off the bench. It wasn't their core starters that were amazing. They had a strong and deep bench. So when you're making a comparison and you're talking about, this team being able to beat that team, one thing I know that is for sure, I've heard a lot of the players talk about it, and it's something that is the same kind of talk you'll get if you start talking about baseball, if you start talking about football. If you're not playing with the same rules, how can you compare? The way they play basketball today versus the way they played it 20 years ago, it's a night and day game. I mean, how many of you have sat back and watched the 30 for 30 of the Bad Boys? And you see how the fouls were intense. These weren't just hacks, or these weren't just, grabbing around the waist. These were punches a lot of times. I mean, come on now. Rick Mahorn got in more fights, him and Lambeer, and they didn't even get thrown out of the game. And so when you start talking about comparison, I think one of the number one things you have to do when you start comparing the two teams is you got to look at the rules. How, what kind of offense they played back in the day versus the offense that they're playing now. Because let's face it, if you compare shooters, you're going to give the nod to the Golden State Warriors. But if you're going to compare the big men and the power, you got to remember Golden State doesn't miss a lot, but when they are off, they've got to have great rebounding. They've got to have second opportunities. And that's something that last year the Cleveland Cavaliers exposed. They went big. They took them to the rack, and Golden State wasn't able to do it. And then, of course, the difference, is Harrison Barnes isn't there today. KD is, and Durant is nailing the 15 to 25 footers. Something that, of course, like I said, Harrison Barnes, he couldn't drop a dime in those last 3 games. He shot, and he shot, but he just couldn't make it. And that's something that we're seeing. KD is having great success making the 15-footers. And let's face it, a 7-footer who can hit a 3-pointer as well as he's doing is amazing. I mean, you got to tip your hat to the Golden State Warriors franchise for actually going out and actually landing him, because face it, when you're a top MVP or past MVP, how many guys are willing to say, I'll give up a little bit of the stardom, I'll give a little bit of the fame, I'll give up and share it? Because in most instances, most guys are trying to go somewhere where they can be the number one guy. I mean, think about Carmelo. You can't put LeBron in that situation because anywhere he goes, he's the number one guy. but he wanted to go somewhere where he was playing with his friends and he was building a strong nucleus. Well, the nucleus in Golden State was already there. And by adding KD, they've added an element that a lot of these teams are really going to have to face, and face the reality is that if LeBron stays in Cleveland the next 4 or 5 years, Cleveland's going to be going back on the East. Even though Toronto looks like they can come up and battle, ain't happening. And then Minnesota, they're a young team out on the West. Kawhi, he's got to have support because that team is getting old. And then, of course, Russ can't do it all in OKC. So you're looking at teams that basically the Cavaliers and the Golden State Warriors, can you imagine playing for the next 4 to 5 years? Because they have that capability. If you look at this team and the nucleus that's around that Golden State team, they're not going anywhere for the next 4 to 5 years. Cleveland is the guesswork. LeBron is probably going to come back, and I don't want to give up on the Cleveland Cavaliers at this stage in the game because home court makes a difference. If they can come back, even the series up 2-2, we got a fight on our hands, guys. It's going to be an amazing fight to watch. And when you think about it, if LeBron can carry this team to a win this week and then this weekend, I think I'm going to go with the Cavaliers because not only has he taken and turned the tides and flipped the switch, basically he's answered all the calls, and he's that boxer that you punch him and you punch him and you punch him, you knock him down. But come the 14th, 15th round, if he's still standing, he's going to have that one lucky punch lasting, and it's going to work on it for him. And guess what? He's going to go and take the battle. So, LeBron to me is that Muhammad Ali versus George Foreman and Zaire. And if they allow Muhammad Ali to stand, and Foreman allowed Muhammad Ali to stand, and now you get into those late rounds, they're going to lose their bite. Because guess what? What's going to enter their mind is doubt. And right now, if you watch the Golden State Warriors, you don't see any doubt. You see a team that has more confidence than any team that I've seen in probably a decade. They've got more confidence than the Lakers. They got more confidence than the Boston Celtics. I mean, this team is that good. Probably the only team I would even compare them in terms of confidence would probably be that Bulls team that was determined to win to get a three-peat. The Lakers talked about it and came out and did their thing. The Bulls went about it, and they went out and proved that they were the best and most dominating team. And like we've said for now 20-plus years, that 1996 team might be the greatest team that has been assembled and put together and played together. Not that necessarily they had so many Hall of Famers, but Tony Kukoc, Ron Harper, Craig Hodges, Jordan, Pippen, man, they just went. Paxson. They just went, Kerr. They just continued to go. And the more they came in and they showed the depth, and at that point, nobody had a good grasp of how to defend Phil Jackson's triangle. And they mastered it. They did it so well, they were able just to dominate teams. And yeah, could they have won more than the 72? I think so. I thought that team really could have went the entire season undefeated if they would have put the effort forward a lot of the games. The games that they lost were close, and they really could have won any of them. They just basically put the scrubs in and, gave Jordan and them guys some rest. And sometimes when you give a star a rest, he's cold when he goes back in. You can't expect him to just pop out and be the same person he was when he left the game. But, so much to talk about, guys. Let me ask this question. Of course, you're listening to the Legends Community Show here on the Power of Voices. I'm Greg Bell, your host, former Ram, former Raider. Come to you every week here on the Power of Voices, talking sports around the clock. How many of you guys checked out that softball game? The women are playing for the NC2As. 17 innings. Oklahoma gets the win over Florida. And, of course, Florida is the two-time reigning champs. But after 17 innings, OU comes away with a 7-5 win. And, they're in that second game right about now. And I'm going to grab that score for you guys just so we can keep up with that. Florida looks to be in a commanding position right now. But, they're in the fourth inning, and Oklahoma's up 5-4. So if you watched that game yesterday, was that a fabulous, I don't know how to say it. the right way. I don't want to call them players. These women play with heart, of a tenacity, with tenacity, with that true grit. And they went 17 innings. The pitching was amazing. And I don't know about you guys. I tell people all the time, the hardest thing as an athlete to do, to me, is hit a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. And these girls are probably throwing in the high 60 to 70-mile range with a softball that's rising, it's curving, it's doing a lot of beautiful things that from a pitcher standpoint. And to see these young ladies put them over the fence, take it deep, make great sacrifice bunts and things of that nature, it's just great to watch sports when it's at its highest levels. If you're watching the Oklahoma and Florida game right now, you're seeing two of the best teams that have come around in women's softball in decades. And Florida is the master. They're trying to keep the reign and continue to be the crown champion. Tonight's game is a big one. It's the best of three, so Florida has to win in order to stay alive. Want to talk to you about something that blew my mind. And, my hometown people are probably going to be mad at me by the end of the day. As you know, I'm a Columbus, Ohio native. I'm a Buckeye at heart, but I bleed blue and gold. But so much is being talked about right now. And I want to get your feelings on it. I want to find out what you think about the Thad Matta firing. This is a firing that happened late May. And so many people are sitting back and they're questioning Eugene Smith, as I should call him. We call him Coach Q back in the day, but me and Gene go a long way back to my 17-year-old age when I walked in the South Bend and was playing on our freshman team. He was our freshman coach, but he's one of the top athletic directors in the NC2A right now. And he made a decision that right now is being called out by pretty much everybody in the industry. Everybody's a little disappointed, mad at him. And I say to everybody, have you looked at Ohio State's athletic program over the past 15 years? And if you haven't, let me give you a glimpse of what it went from to where it is today. They went from a 30-plus graduation completion of their student athletes to now they're up over 80% in the last 15 years. They're graduating athletes out of this program. They're competing for national championships every year. And all of a sudden, a program that, honestly, when Thad Matta got the job, I can't tell you I was high on it because Ohio State, next to, a school like North Carolina, is one of the perennial jobs in America for all their jobs, whether it's women's lacrosse, men's lacrosse, swimming. Ohio State is the largest university in the United States right now. They have probably over 40 some odd athletic scholarship sports. Most universities like Notre Dame, North Carolina, you're talking 26. They're up in the 40s. Equestrian, you name it. I mean, they got rowing. They got all kind of stuff that they actually give scholarships for. So when you're talking about a multi-million-dollar program like that, how do you question a guy who has turned this program around? Not only is he probably the number one athletic director in the NC2A right now, but he's tried to keep a clean ship. And let's be honest, at a place like Ohio State, that's a hard thing to do. You can't control all the boosters. You can't control all the sponsors. But we know the Maurice Clarett stories, the Art Schlichter stories. That was the program as Gene was not there and coming in. And that's when that program was graduating in the 30% and competing. From a recruiting standpoint, back then they were recruiting the top athletes in the country against the Michigans, against the Michigan States. They were going after 5-star guys. And over the last 7-8 years since Urban Meyer has come in there from a football standpoint, they have competed for the national championship. I want to say 3 out of his last 6-7 years. So now he makes a very needed call. And I say needed for 2 reasons. Many people are going to talk about his health. Thad Matta had back surgery. I want to say it was 5 years ago. I understand that pain. Thad, I've been through it. I'm living through it right now. I have pain in my back constantly. I had back surgery back in 1996. And Thad, you're a 50-year-old man. I'm a 54-year-old man. I know the pain that you're going through. Unfortunately for Thad, something happened during the surgery and it left him with a drop foot. Now, I can't imagine that. I have a foot that goes numb periodically, but the nerves are still kind of doing their best to function. So from a health standpoint, I understand you, Thad. But from a job security standpoint, this is a program that was falling on bad times. And I'll be honest, when Thad got the job, I wasn't high on it. He had Conley. He had Daquan Cook come through there. He had the big boy Odom. And as freshmen, they took him to the NC2As. That was it. That's as close as he's gotten into a national championship. And so when you start talking about a program like Ohio State, they want to compete for national championships. And most importantly, they want to compete in the recruiting game. And there have not been any top 20 kids. I mean, think about this. He inherited Greg Oden, Daquan Cook, and Mike Conley, all first one and done guys. And I know that's, you kill a program when you start talking about one and dones, but Kentucky constantly gets one and dones and keeps the program in the top 7 or 8 in the country. Ohio State was doing it for a while. They had some programs. They were getting always the top kid out of Ohio. Unfortunately, they couldn't land LeBron. He went straight to the pros. But they were able to land the top tier guys. And right now they haven't been able to do that. And I'm not talking totally negative on the fact that Ohio State's football program is so good. But when you've got a football program that is so prominent, somebody's got to carry the weight. And so when Gene Smith decided to make the call, it has who says firing has a date, a timestamp? And don't give me the fact that, all the other positions, you lost out on this guy, you lost out on that guy. Guys, let me remind you of something very important. When Notre Dame decided that they needed a change and they fired Tyrone Willingham, guess who committed to a contract with the University of Notre Dame? And in the drop of a dime, on an airplane flight to South Bend, they diverted the plane and went to Florida. That was Urban Meyer. So if a guy wants to coach at your university, which, trust me, there are many guys right now that are qualified to be the head coach at Ohio State, they will leave wherever they're at right now with a buyout. And let's remember, I just told you one thing about Ohio State. They're probably one of the wealthiest colleges in America. So the fact that they have to do a buyout to get this coach out of his contract, most coaches have a 1-year buyout salary. Guess what? They're going to get the man that they want. If they're talking about the gentleman who was the Thad's assistant, he'll be back. They all come back because here's the thing. If your heart's set on coaching the Buckeyes, you're going to leave wherever you are. I mean, let's remember Lou Holtz. I joke with it more than anything. Lou Holtz, granny, he had a contract at Minnesota. He was there 1 year. But what did he have written into his contract? If Notre Dame ever came calling, that was the one team, it didn't make a difference on a buyout, he could leave. That was part of his contract. And I'm sure a lot of these other guys have gotten pretty clever. Because let's face it, with that drop foot, and the records that were losing records, I should say, with Thad Matta, I'm sure some of his top assistants knew that this opportunity was going to be coming down the road, and it's probably going to be coming down the road within the next 2 to 3 years, because one of the things that they're all complaining is that why didn't Gene let him play out his contract? Well, he couldn't allow him to play out his contract. How many more losing seasons? And mind you, I'm not talking about just in the Pac-10. I'm talking about in the national championship race. How many could Ohio State afford to continue to lose? So when I think about what Gene Smith did, it was just a determination that he had to make. And you know what? That's why he's in the position he is. That's why he's being paid the money he's being paid. Because it takes a hard man to be in that position, a quality man to be in that position that knows sometimes a hard decision needs to be made, and it's going to be time for him to make it, and that's just what he did. Moving on, guys. Here's a story that, I don't know if I'm going to spend a whole lot of time on it, but it's something that just blew my mind because, why did they have to go there is what I was saying. And when you hear it, you're going to probably say the same thing. War Machine. Keppenhaver, I guess how Koppenhaver. The MMA, I guess you could say, disgraced fighter now. He tortured, kidnapped, and assaulted this is the funniest part about the whole thing. And I shouldn't say funny, but the most curious thing about the whole thing, he assaulted, kidnapped his porn star girlfriend. Guys, what did he have to kidnap her for? If she's a porn star, she's going. I mean, all it takes is a couple dollars. Why would you have to kidnap and torture and sexually assault a porn star girlfriend? And, of course, I guess there was a guy involved, so he probably just lost his mind. But he gets sentenced to 36 years to life for this crime. And here's the thing that blew my mind. The guy is making a statement, and he actually says this, and I want to read this to you. He makes a troubling past, talking about his troubling past as a kid growing up, and he makes reference to the late Aaron Hernandez, the former NFL player who committed suicide in the Massachusetts prison in April. I should have killed myself by now, War Machine says. There is no reason right now that I should be in this dirt right now lying. I should be in the dirt right now lying next to Aaron Hernandez. That's 100% true, War Machine said in a statement. Really? He had to bring up Aaron Hernandez. How did that actually come out of his mouth? I mean, where did he pull it from to bring Aaron Hernandez? We had thought we had kind of put him to rest. We weren't going to hear that name anytime soon. And War Machine decides to smack us across the face with a little Aaron Hernandez. Thank you, War Machine. Good night. Go on into that cell and spend the rest of your life. I mean, let's face it. He's 35 now. Get out. The earliest he can get out and ask for parole is at 71. And if you know Vegas, let's face it, we know Vegas because OJ's been there for, 7-8 years now? You're not getting out anytime soon. They take crime pretty significant. They take and lower the hammer. That's all I can say about the judges in Vegas. And you have to say what this gentleman did to his porn star girlfriend, and I don't care if it was rage or whatever, kidnapping, assaulting, beating, abusing, sexually assaulting. I don't care if she's a porn star or a hooker or whatever. It's no place for that in America. No place in this world that we live in. And thank goodness the judges in Nevada decided to throw the hammer and pretty much lock it up and throw away the key. So, man, I mean, it just blew my mind that I had to hear that story. And that story leads me to Michigan State. 3 kids. And I think by now they've released their 3 names of the 3 kids who assaulted the woman on the Michigan State campus. Those kids. Guys, I mean, when do young men and young women learn from others' mistakes? That's one of the things I've always asked kids. You don't always have to make the mistake. Sometimes you can read about it, learn from the guilt, learn from the crime, and not have to worry about doing the time. But it's just like that crazy cycle of being athletic freshmen and sophomores on our NC2A campuses continues. That cycle continues to go. These 3 young men assaulted a woman. The crime, they've been arrested. And D'Antonio, God bless him, he decided to make a very strong move and just separate himself from these kids and say they're on their own. Unfortunately for a good compadre of mine, Curtis, oh my goodness, I'm missing Curtis's last name, but Curtis, man, I can't get his name off the top of my head right now, but he finds himself out of a job. The 3 young men kind of brought it to him, and he should have immediately taken it to D'Antonio, and instead he kept it to himself, and then D'Antonio contacted him, and now Curtis is out of a job that he was really brought in to help kids make these decisions. So unfortunately for him, he'll have to start looking for a new position. And here we got to bring up something that really is a crime to me. Crime that we're still talking about it in this tone too, because I'm sure you've known by now that the Seattle Seahawks have decided to sign Austin Davis. And for many of you guys, I'm sure you're saying, who the hell is that? Here's an unproven, no commodity. And Colin Kaepernick, who visited Seattle earlier in the week last week, we thought that might be a good place to land, but the public outraged. And here's the sad thing. There have been more instances than what Kaepernick did that you can be outraged at. The Giants, kept the abuser on their team for half a season, until the word got out and everybody heard the tapes and what have you. The Giants kind of just shuffled it under the rug. They didn't make any claims of getting rid of the punter. And then, of course, it comes out publicly. They hear the tape. Then they want to terminate his contract. Well, Kaepernick still is unemployed. And the sad thing here is we can't put a finger on why, other than the fact that he's being blackballed at this point in his career. And should the blackball be, is it appropriate? All I can tell you is I remember listening to Jesse Ventura earlier this year, the former mayor of Minnesota. And Jesse basically said that he went to war to fight for the freedoms that we have here in the United States. And the fact that Kaepernick decided that he was going to take that opportunity to exercise his free right, a lot of people are turned and twisted by it. The bottom line is that, there are guys who have done worse that we really should look at them with a shallow eye, but we don't say too much to them. They're back playing, whether it be the major leagues, whether it be the National Football Leagues, whether it's basketball. Driving intoxicated. That's one of my no-nos. But, we slap him on the hand. And, before I get too far about that, we'll talk about Derek Fisher. There's a lot of things that bother me, but this thing with Colin Kaepernick is really starting to get under my skin because everything he did is about what we as Americans are proudest about. Being able to exercise our First Amendments, being able to be peaceful, to do things. It's your own choice. And whether he believes in his cause or whether his cause was meant to create the talk and the buzz that it's getting today, I don't think it's fair that this guy is really being ostracized because he used his freedom of speech. And I know Americans are going to, kill themselves because somebody decided not to stand. Really? You're really telling me you want this guy in his career to be over because he decided that the injustice that he saw on television, and let's face it, there was injustice. And what he wanted to talk about, so many other people exercise their freedom in different ways. Let's face it, he didn't riot. He didn't go out and take a rifle and just rightfully go out and shoot police officers. Think about, I don't see anybody talking about, hanging any of the guys that went out and executed some cops just because they were cops. Eventually they're going to probably get the death penalty, but I don't see all the backlash in the media the way I'm seeing about Colin Kaepernick. This guy did something that was so peaceful that was his own right, and it's his right. Maybe he should have just stayed in the locker room. That might have been a better way of showing his right, and that wouldn't have offended so many people. But I understand when people talk about the fact that people are dying for us. That flag represents more than that. Trust me, I understand. My father served, was overseas, the whole 9 yards. But as a kid, I was never told, what the Pledge of Allegiance. I wasn't told what the national anthem meant until literally 2 years ago until I read the poem. I didn't, I can understand what some people are upset about. I know a lot of people of both black and Caucasian that think the national anthem should be removed as our national song because of what it stands for. We removed the Confederate flag, but here no one's talking or making a big to do about some of the words that poem actually said. So it's kind of interesting that Colin Kaepernick is still unemployed and the Seattle Seahawks are signing Austin Davis. And here you tell me this one. Since I'm on the Seattle Seahawks, is Trevion Boykin's record right now any concern to you guys? If you don't know, Trevion has been arrested twice for DUI. That's a no-no to me. I'm one of those persons that I'm a true advocacy. I'm an advocate for anti-drunk driving. And so for me, he basically takes the laws and throws them to the side. It doesn't apply to him. But they would rather have a booze-drinking driver than a kneeling Colin Kaepernick, who is better. That's the sad part about it. His tools are even better than Trayvon Boykin's. And Kaepernick continues to sit to the sideline. And, I know Pete well enough to know he thought about it, but I think a lot of the pressure is coming from the Billionaires Club. The owners are basically saying our fan base won't live with this. And I don't know. I mean, I'm not in that position as an owner to question what my fans are going to do. But I do know at some point in life, we all have a freedom of choice, and I don't want that freedom to be taken away. No matter what anyone's saying right now, I want the freedom to stand or to sit. I want the freedom to say yes or say no. We got NBA players whose fathers are in prison just because the NBA player is boisterous. I think that's over in Serbia or Turkey. He's being imprisoned for nothing. I don't want to be in a country where I can't open my mouth and say hello or say goodbye. That then starts to make me think, I hate to use this as a scenario, but, the situation with LeBron James and his California home. He actually brought up the fact that I don't want to live in a time where things were like when Emmett Till was killed here in the United States, where you can't speak to somebody just because of the color of their skin. I don't want to live in those times again, and I'm sure most of you don't either. So when you start taking away privileges, and mind you, we're taking away a privilege because the next person won't do what Colin Kaepernick did. He'll keep his mouth closed. He'll conform to society, and in conforming to society, you're giving in to the pressure that you don't have a choice anymore. So at some point, we as people have to look at what Colin Kaepernick did. He wanted to open up our thought process. He said it from the beginning. Now, the fact that he's decided to, move away from that because it's got to be just because of the real pressure of trying to carry that weight on his shoulders. And the question probably was he the right person to carry that on his shoulder? Right now, I got to say no, because one, you never walk away from money like he did. They should have just told him to cut me. I'm sure he would have got the rest of his guarantee. And I'm just, like I said, I'm shocked. When I think about Pete Carroll, Pete's a pretty progressive guy. And to keep Boykin on that squad with 2 DUIs, come on now. They're not just pulling you over because you seem like you're drunk. You're doing something. I mean, let's ask Tiger Woods. And mind you, Tiger wasn't under the influence of any really, I should say, illicit drug. He was under drugs, but it wasn't alcohol like first noted. And let's face it, if you take more than one pill, you have a chance of an allergic reaction. So, it's a shame. These guys have all the money in the world. Tiger was one of those kinds that I couldn't figure out. If I knew I was Tiger Woods and I was flying back from California, the last thing I would be doing is driving a car if I knew I was taking any kind of medication. Late at night, have a chauffeur. I mean, you can afford a company. They can drive you every day of the week. That's where I kind of lose my mind, because these guys know better, and they have the the funds to be actually do exactly what they're talking about. Go home safely. All right, let's get on my man here because I got to ask that question as I started the show. And I'm going to ask you now the direct question. And if you weren't here at the beginning, I'm Greg Bell. This is the Legend Community Show here on the Power of Voices. I asked earlier, when did 600 home runs become a passe, just a pass in the grass? Albert Pujols, hell of a baseball player, probably a first-time Hall of Fame MLB guy. But he went over the 600 mark, and I'm going to tell you, let's look at the 600 mark right now as we look at it because Barry Bonds sitting up there at 762, Hank Aaron at 755, Babe Ruth 714, Alex Rodriguez 696, Willie Mays at 660, Ken Griffey Jr., the sweetest swing I've ever seen, 630, Jim Thome 612, Sammy Sosa at 609, and Albert Pujols is sitting right now at 600. He'll probably get by Thome and Sammy Sosa this year. But have PEDs ruined baseball? Has it ruined the long ball? I mean, we don't even talk about the 600 hitter like we used to. And this is a guy who has probably been one of the true power hitters, the Mark McGwire kind of hitters, where it's coming from the strength of this man, not just off the timing of the smooth rhythm of him, like a Ken Griffey Jr., like a Barry Bonds. But straight power. I mean, when you see Albert Pujols swing, is a big man swinging a big stick, making the ball travel a long way. And I was a little disappointed. Major League Baseball didn't make anything special about it. Guys, do you know 600 is still a plateau that 98 to 97% of the Major League Baseball won't even dream there, let alone think about chasing it. Most guys finish their careers in 400 home run area, 600 home runs, and nobody did much of a celebration. I'm a little disappointed at the Angels. Yeah, you stopped it for a little bit. You know what? He should have had a golden bat brought out to him, something, because this guy left a quality St. Louis team to come out to California, 5 years ago, and he's played through injuries, through pain, through very poor teams, and look where he's at now. He's at a plateau that very few men will ever get to. I mean, there are probably, I don't know. Let's look here. Everybody on here, 1, 2, 3. There are probably 4 guys out of these nine names here that may never make the Hall of Fame because of PEDs. But the other 3 that are there, the Hank Aaron's, the Babe Ruth, and the Ken Griffey Jr. and Willie Mays, those 4. How do you not talk about being in royalty? That's a class of royalty. And Albert Pujols struck the 600, and it was no fanfare. I mean, it's disappointing as a sports person not to see greatness being honored. And this is a guy who should have gotten some honors for what he did just a week ago. 600, amazing. Throw your hat off to Albert Pujols. I'm hoping that he gets to the 700 mark. He can play another 7 years. I think in 7 years he'll put himself up there around the 700 mark and find himself getting the acclaim that he should and truly deserve. He really deserves to be honored for 600. It's a magnificent milestone, and like I said, 98% of the guys that ever put on a major league jersey, they won't even be able to chase 600 home runs. That's something only for the elite batters. Now, here's a great story. Southern California, you got to be tipping your hat big time right now. Hunter Green, Sherman Oaks Notre Dame High School, right here in Southern California, did something this past week that pretty much, from what my knowledge tells me, and I say this because I'm really digging deep here, and I'm going to say probably 8, probably more like 6 or 7 in the history of the Sports Illustrated. as a high school player to be donned on the front cover of a Sports Illustrated magazine. Big honors, national magazine. Hunter Greene, the number one baseball prospect in America, right here in the Southland, goes to, like I said, he's over at the Sherman Oaks High School. Tip your hat to him because, like I said, I can name off the top of my head, I want to say my buddy Clark Kellogg made it. The King, LeBron James, has made it. I want to say Tiger probably made the cover of Sports Illustrated. Hunter's a fourth person to make it. And they right there, I know there got to be three others, but I'm stuck at those 4 or 5 guys right there that have truly donned the cover of Sports Illustrated as a high school senior. Now, yours truly, I got it one cover, I think, may have gotten 2. I got to remember back in my college days. But to don the cover of Sports Illustrated is an honor, and this kid has, man, he's living up to the glory. I watched him do an interview on ESPN, ESPN 6, and man, what a polished young man. They're doing some great things out there at Notre Dame, and if you guys don't know it, Carlos Stanton came from Sherman Oaks as well. A lot of great ball players coming from that program. Great Catholic school. Of course, it's got to be a great school. It's got the name Notre Dame, guys. Don't take anything away from it. And here's a story I got to jump on before I get too far as well. And just so you know, as usual, this is Greg Bell. You're listening to the Legends Community Show here on the Power of Voices. And tune in to us weekdays, guys. You can hear about the girls, the guys, the nutrition, my man Lee Michaels. Everybody's here on the Power of Voices giving you what you need to hear from talk radio. And here, of course, is the Legends Community Show. I give you sports, and more sports. Got a question for you guys. Good friend of mine. Is this a breakup that's getting nasty? That's what I got to ask you guys. Mike Greenberg, Mike Golic. If you haven't heard, about 3 weeks ago, it came out nationally that the guys were ending the show. Mike and Mike in the Morning on ESPN dying out. And now the breakup is starting to get a little nasty. It's gotten so bad, guys. I tune in every morning because, one, I support my fellow Irishmen, and I tune in to check out, see what's going on with Mike and the other guys. Is this breakup getting to be a little nasty? I mean, I hate to say this, but the breakup is it's starting to look like Kelly and Mike. You know, Mike Strahan and Kelly. It's starting to get like that because now you're starting to hear the rumblings. Greeny decided that he needed a show of his own, was ready to move out on his own. Instead of telling his business partner for the last, I want to say this show has been on the air for the last 17 years. Almost, it might even be 18, 20 years. I can't tell you how long. But Mike has been a good friend of mine since 1982 when he came to the University of Notre Dame, actually 1981. His brother came in 1980 with me. And a quality person through and through. Great family guy, got 2 great sons, great daughter swimming at Notre Dame, just graduated last year. And he's been hosting Mike and Mike. He's been kind of the fun end while Greeny's been the serious end, you know, the Northwestern broadcast major, the whole 9 yards, and just make fun of Mike. But Mike has had a presence on that show, and the two of them had magic, kind of like Regis and Kathy, kind of like Michael and Kathy looked for a while. But somewhere in the underlining moments, Mike Greenberg decided he wanted something special that's just his. And I can understand that, guys. It happens all the time in radio. It happens all the time in television. But what you tell me, is it something that he should have at least been respectful enough to say, hey, Mike, I'm thinking about going in a little different direction? Should he have called him? Should he have found out through the grapevine? That's really what I'm asking. You tell me what you think about that. Is it something that if you're getting ready to split from your partners, now mind you, it's not a divorce, but now it's starting to take the shape of like a marriage, man. These guys have been together forever. They just went into the Radio Hall of Fame together. And right after you've gone into the Hall of Fame, man, I thought the show was just going to continue to blow up and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And now you got the divorce. And the sad thing about it is, it's gotten to the point where the family members are getting involved and the tweeting. And I don't know why you tweet. I got a Twitter account that I don't use I use it maybe every blue moon when I'm posting on Instagram, and I don't do that very well either. But you start tweeting things, and the family members start tweeting things, and it starts to get ugly. And remember, we still have a working relationship, and now it's gotten to the point where they're never on the show anymore. And I don't think it's going to make it through this season. I think ESPN is going to have to call it quit. They're going to have to expedite Mike Greenberg's show. They've already put Mike with his son and I can't think of the other broadcaster. They put the three of them in the morning crew. And you're wondering, why did it have to come to this? And I can tell you, I'm not on the ESPN side. I don't live in Massachusetts where they both live, but I know Mike Golic pretty well. And Mike is a guy who has great character. And I can tell you point blank, I can guarantee you it's not as sour as he's made it feel like. Now, yeah, he might have been a little disappointed. And he's a man enough to say, probably to Greeny, why didn't you just come to me and tell me? And I can think of Greeny being a little, soft on the edges and probably wanted to keep it to himself, not knowing that by doing so, it turns it from what could have been a great relationship continue to a sour relationship. And now you're talking about, you've watched his kids grow up. You've been around his kids. These are the kind of relationships you don't find too often in life. And when you have them, you want to hold them. I tell people a lot of times, friends are very, very hard to come by. I think I've got 2 handful of friends and a lot of partners and a lot of boys and a lot of guys that, we are good acquaintances. But the friend that I have in my mind is that guy that I can ride or die, do or die with. I'm there for him when it's bad. I'm there with him when it's good. And I always looked at that Mike and Mike relationship as one of those type relationships. And it's sad right now to see where that relationship is gone. Now, before we get out of here today, we're going to spend the next run of 10 minutes or so. I want to talk Cavaliers. I want to talk Golden State Warriors. Give me your predictions, guys. We're getting into the nitty gritty. Cavs are down 2-0 right now, going into the home court. Do the Cavaliers stand a chance right now of bringing this series back to Golden State? Because I didn't think there would be a sweep, but the way Golden State's playing right now, anything could happen. You tell me, give me your impression right here on the Legends Community Show. I'm your host, Greg Bell. You're listening in on the Power of Voices, and I'm just telling you, if the LeBron James that I watched last week comes to play like that, and he can get any supporting help from not his 2, but from his 6th, 7th, and 8th man, just a little bit of help, rebounding, defense, scoring, I think LeBron and them could not necessarily even it up, but I have no problem watching them go back to Golden State 3-1. And the only reason I say that is if you got history on your side, they're always going to be thinking about what happened last year, what happened last year, what happened last year. And you have your bench players remembering, hey, we're not out until we're dead. Until they cut our throat, we're not dead. So as an animal, they're going to continue to fight, scrap, claw. And I see the Cavaliers literally getting at least one out of this week. And when they go back to Golden State, anything is possible. I'm not going to count the Cavaliers out. I'm an Ohio boy, and I'm pulling for the Cavaliers to bring one more title back to Cleveland. But you got to look and say to yourself, how much more does LeBron have to do? And guys, I'm not going to spend any time trying to compare KD versus LeBron. It's not fair. Let's be honest about it. You're talking about a 7-foot guy who has great range. Not that makes a difference, But these are two completely different games. One is a power game, one's a finesse game. One takes over a game, the other one can close a game. And both of them are daggers in the heart when you look at them. You need one of both. And let's be honest, if KD goes on an off night shooting, and let's face it, we've seen him do it. Last year, Game 7 against the Golden State Warriors, he took a chill pill. If he goes off and he's not able to hit the 30-footer like he's doing now, and I mean literally 30-footers, this Cleveland Cavaliers team could get hot. That's the one thing about streak shooters. JRE, Shumper, the Cavs in general, if they get in a hot streak, you don't know when that faucet is going to turn off. And right now, if you're a Cleveland fan, you're praying on a hot streak to come at home. It's historically known bench players play better at home. Don't know why that is. I can't give you an analysis of why that is. I'm just giving you stats. And right now, Cleveland has a chance to go home, capture one. And they got to get the first one, because if they lose game 3, it's almost like a dagger, because you're really, your spirits are down. You know, that's probably the one thing about basketball that I guess you can favor over football. It's not one game and you're done. And now you have to earn it over a course of 5 to 7 games. And for the Golden State Warriors, if they win 4, that's a sweep. So Cleveland's got to get this game to, this Wednesday. They've got to be able to close out that one. And LeBron's got to take it over, not only from a scoring standpoint, from a defensive standpoint. The one thing I think I haven't seen out of LeBron James pretty much the second half of the season, he was a tenacious defensive player, just like Michael Jordan. Because of his body, because of his strength, LeBron was a great defensive player coming into this season. And for some reason, the entire team, I love to tell you it's just LeBron or Kyrie Irving, but nobody on that team right now is playing any kind of tenacious defense. They're kind of catching there, and they're spending too much time on their the one-man shows. Kyrie has all the tools in the world to be a great point guard with the skills that he can handle that ball. The question is when he can dish it. And right now, his jumper's not working. So you got to get other people into the offense. You can't just decide that I'm going to do it on my own. So I got to see Kyrie distribute a little bit more and get a little bit more shots for Kevin Love. Of all the players who's actually having a really good series with LeBron, Kevin Love is having an outstanding series. Now, I know I've heard about Tristan Thompson not being on the board, so Kevin is getting a lot of boards as well. But if you watch Kevin since he was in high school and when he came to UCLA, as well as when he was at Minnesota, the one thing that was consistent about Kevin Love is he's a good ball player and a sound offensive and defensive man. So let's look for the Cavs to pull one out before the end of this week and go into next week, get another one, and let's even the series up and make it the best of 3. That's when the series gets extremely exciting. Well, guys, you know what? We've had a good week here with you. I thank you for joining me again here on the Power of Voices. This is Greg Bell. I'm signing out. I'll talk to you guys next week right here from the Power of Voices. Take care.